All right, we were still talking about, if you recall, how the intellect is made to, from one survey, is made to measure, to test, and to record. And a little more specifically, our sub-trans category, how the intellect is to determine what is true and operational and what might be false and dysfunctional at any particular time. And how, sort of a parallel sketching of it, the intellect is also in charge of announcing what is liked and what is not liked. And how one aspect of civilization is for bunches of individuals to get together and collectively be able to believe that which one man cannot, as witnessed by, let us say, the best example being religion, and on the other end of the dirty stick, civilization being individuals coming together and to collectively think, as in science, that which seems to be scarce, if not somewhat difficult for one mind to do. That's what somebody told me. That's as far as we got last time. Somebody reminded me just as I stepped up here. And it sounds good to me. Were you listening? I was listening last time. We were talking about such matters as that. So picking up sort of there. Remembering that I was giving you two views. And it's not to pick on either one for any particular reason, but they are the perhaps best functional examples of what would seem to be the secondary world of man. The aspects of civilization, it all being somewhat operationally synonymous, of religion and science, just from people's ordinary view, and we're not now playing some ping-pong game of one over the other, as I hope you will see shortly in a new manner. But you could look at the intellect. First off, I assume right quick, everybody does remember, were it not for man's intellect, unless you are still involved with the brothers Grimm and their ideas of religion. It was that way for religion, wasn't it? I always get it confused. Unless you're involved with that, you have got to realize, were it not for man's intellect, as far as any reasonable person on this planet could see. Now, we're not even talking about people like us, or you, I mean. We're talking about reasonable people. Even they would have to admit that just based upon any reasonable observation on this planet, that were it not for man's intellect, he would have no religion, whether you approve of it or not, or whether you believe in it, or science, whether you believe in it and whether you approve of it. He simply would not. So, I am picking what would seem to be, as you know, the good classic arguments still going on that seems to be exemplified by the struggle, as they call it, between the hard world of science and the soft world of religion. And so I just want to remind you of that because we're talking about two different things that within inside, right at the core of civilization, you have, from two ways of looking at it. Of course, for anybody who has a good revolutionist mind already cranked up, it's all the same thing, but hell, everything's all the same thing, and if we're going to do that, we would have taken the world of particle physics and turned it into a very small dot, which will not fill up an hour videotape. It'll fill up your life, it'll fill up your brain. And so we were taking the two views that we have within civilization, men getting together. It's not one or the other. It's not one over the other. It can happen simultaneously. It can happen all sorts of ways. Sequentially, in opposition. But you have groups of men who seem to be getting together and they produce religion. And now put religion either in quotation marks or small r's or big r's, wherever you grew up in school. Just take these as being the two polar examples of man's intellect at work, and consider religion is from the intellect and not the heart and the soul and all that stuff. That take it as being the two extremes of religion and science. So you have men in civilization getting together, and they collectively, two ways to start looking at this, they get together, and if we're going to take the religious end of the stick, they get together and a bunch, might as well get technical, we've gone this far, get a bunch of people together. They can believe, as in religion, using believe rather than think, they can believe stuff that one guy can't. And on the other end of the stick, you have bunches of people getting together, and they will collectively, now in the world of science, using that as being the other polar from religion, they can get together and apparently think, theorize, plot, map, but can think, not believe, let's call it think, in manners collectively that seems quite difficult, very unusual for one guy to be able to do by himself. All right? Now consider, and let me remind you again, they're not all that different. But as always, we have to start, or it's most efficient to start in some way that almost seems to make ordinary sense, which is the trick that some people play on themselves, like, well, yes, I'm all right. I can get to work, and I can call my mother, and I can go attend funerals, and I can do this and that. And then worry about whether the metaphor council is going to jump into your brain and say, no, 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 you could hurt yourself. So we're taking what would seem to be a reasonable starting point, but consider religion. And any of you who have any great reservations about religion, just forget about it as being something specific. Just consider it would be the other side, the other end in a three-dimensional world of science. Consider what happens with religion. Is it ever going to be possible we're going to reach a night that it's more reminders and asides than it is a program? Justice will finally be served, since I pointed out that TV seems to be, as some of you have noted, like becomes more and more teasers and promos for what's coming up. And if they keep on and on and on, then whatever the present show is diminishes. And don't write me, that same guy, and ask me if that's actually a valid showbiz hint or some more of that crummy metaphor thing. I was just going to remind you that religion, spread it way out. Just spread it way out. Look at it as being the operations of the mind, if this helps a little bit more, that you can look at it as being science, and then like hard science, and then social science, or soft science. That's what I mean by religion. All forms of almost everything that does not seem to be absolutely clinical science, then that's religion. And it doesn't have to be in particular religion that you think of. It does not have to be a sect. It does not have to be in particular or specific ritual. But it's men getting together. And here is what I specifically wanted you to consider. Also, could I refresh your memory to a rhetorical, if not musical, question that we were pondering last time also? Could it be asked, do men band together in civilization because they collectively think and believe? Or does civilization occur so that men get together and can collectively think and believe? Now back to where we were, which was one more time, I can't resist. Don't look at this, and don't let your old brain tell you this is any kind of attack on religion. So just spread it. Everything on the other end from hard science is religion. Now consider. Men get together, and within civilization, individuals are brought together who individually don't know what to think about life, don't know what to believe about life. But civilization brings them together, and then collectively through processes, I can just put it quite simply, through processes of debate, discussion, imagining what the gods might want. They seem to develop plans, guidelines, formulas by which they live. Think about it 1 second. We still have the problem of the watchless. Even after warning you that it's not really having to do with religion specifically, you can think about religion specifically if you've got your revolutionist ability to think in almost opposing ways simultaneously, because this does apply. It's really metaphoric rather than symbolic, because it really has to do with religion itself. Again, assuming that you are not tied up with there being some kind of force outside this dimension, some anthropomorphic force that's sending down messages through prophets and all that stuff. Again, just religion in the broadest sense. Can you imagine, rhetorically, one person becoming religious? I'm saying one person by himself. I'm going to have to tell you, it's inoperable. Think about it. It takes a group of men, a group of individuals to get together. And what happens? It didn't get much of a reaction when I first described, so here we go again. It's individuals that do not know what to believe, what to think about life, and they get together collectively, and they seem to come up with something. Again, assuming you can withdraw, like, well, that's the way the gods work and their great wisdom. Go off and figure that one out by yourself. Of course, that does make sense. Well, the gods are busy, and if just one guy over here says, I'd like to know what's going on, the gods might not have time to fool with it, but you get a whole bunch of guys. Is that it? And then he says, all right, I'll tell you. Now, think about it. It still has to do with life itself being alive. It has to do with, well, life itself being alive. You take individuals. No individual at the ordinary level on this planet knows what to believe. Does not know what to think about being alive, is what belief is, as opposed to science. They do not. No one does. No one. But you get a group of people. What was that technical term? A bunch of guys. You get them together, and then collectively, and it goes through a process. It goes through a process that is very often condemned by other areas of life's body outside of it. Such as, well, how in the world does a church come up with a pope and think it's some kind of divine crap when I know what goes on? It's no secret. They get back there and vote. Oh, what is this crap? Or what is it, the Bible, the Quran even, all of them, they keep changing. Or why is it these people all involved saying, boy, here is the true version of Vedi Mecum, the King James Bible. Well, if you just know just a smidgen of history, you can condemn that and say, hey, wait a minute. You know, does anybody ever notice what the name King James was and who that sucker was? Not that he had a vested interest. You can do that, but you still miss the point, because what you have are groups of people, groups of individuals, that none of the individuals, and it's got nothing to do with psychology, got nothing to do with religion or intelligence, it has to do with the flow of energy. It has to do with life being alive. None of the individuals, be they popes, sub-popes, agnostics, atheists, or even, God knows what, tow truck drivers, none of them individually knows what to believe, which is what to think about being alive. But something happens when groups of people get together. And what I was using about the aspect of certain forms of organized religions, well, all of them, of course, are subject to being creatures of political machinations, all sorts of quite mundane and secular tugs and pulls. That's not a form of attack, because if that did not happen, then even collectively men could not come up with some idea that, well, wait a minute, here's what God wants us to do. Of course, after the fact, because of the way the institutions need to run in life, it comes out finally, and it goes up and down, but it comes out that, well, wait a minute, here's what our God wants. He left word, this is what he said. The further back it was, of course, the better, because you can't look up somebody and say, he actually told you that? Are you sure you understood him? I mean, he didn't mumble, or he had a real bad down east accent, and you were from Mississippi, and you went, what? It has to be that the group, this bunch, this collective, they argue, they debate. At times, I'm sure there were fist fights. You're not surprised to hear that. But what comes out of this? Besides applications for Blue Cross payments. Now what comes out seems to be the will of the gods. That through this debate, through this arguing, it comes out. At least anyone think that we have to keep making hand gestures about collectively. Where do you come up with what you think you know? And if, of course, you were ordinary, you'd say things like, well, my parents raised me in a certain religion. Or I studied religions on my own, and I, through great reflection, study, and a few drugs, I felt as though I in some way got in touch with the cosmos. But you still was this. I mean, if you're going to take drugs, that's a form of a debate. It's all a form of trying to change where the lightning hits the goo. You're changing the neural landscape is what you're attempting to do. Well, drugs and alcohol, you could say, just sort of a very shorthand version of debate. You know, rather than pondering if a man's staying around, he's sitting around pondering, why has my wife been an hour to an hour and a half late constantly for the last 2 weeks? Could she be working a second job and I don't know about? Maybe she's visiting a sick friend. She couldn't possibly be having you can debate that, or the shortcut is take a drink. Take a couple of drinks right quick and think, where is that bitch? Hey, she's out sleeping with somebody. I mean, you look at the time you saved. That's what drug. That was. For those of you that weren't here last time, I was pointing out anyway. If you think that's just funny, well, you just think that's funny then. Everything from mathematics to hand gestures to being dramatic to laughing to taking drugs to being involved with romantic affairs and arguments. Surely by now some of you understand all of that is simply an alteration of brain chemistry. There's nothing right or wrong. Collecting stamps is, if you enjoy it. And of course, if you're reasonable and you look at it for what it is, that changes your brain chemistry true because you think, God damn, the world's full of idiots. Don't any of you for a minute rationalists write me. So that was just a joke. It's all a matter that the nervous system is being altered. That's what being alive in the secondary sense is. That's the only way you think. Back to where we were. So the people get together, collections of individuals who, to get real blunt, who could not individually be religious. I'm just going to have to go ahead and assume, the faster we move, that you understand I don't have to keep trying to caveat every little thing. No individual could be religious. No individual at the ordinary level on this planet ever has, up until now, and we won't worry about what's going to happen because you ain't going to be here. But up until now, no individual could ever figure out at the ordinary level what to believe. Remember, belief in the largest sense. What to think about being here and being alive. Nobody. That's one reason I'll also point out that besides the tabloid heroes, who appears to be the spiritual heroes of life. Of course, I know now that people say in the city, ordinary people say, well, Jesus or Buddha or Moses, he's great because the gods touched him. Tut. Maybe. Let's get better. You know why they're heroes? Because they seem by themselves to know what to think. Now, ordinary people say, that's not true. The gods told them what to think. That's what made them special. And of course, you can't prove what I just said. And they're right, as always. But do you hear? Forget whether they were in some way plugged into other dimensions or gods talked to them. Just notice this. They would appear to be, at least in retrospect, at least historically, which is the point for historicals, that they verged on being an exception to the rule I just stated. That individually, at ordinary levels, no one, remember individually, no one knows what to think. Or, talking about the religious end is still where we are, No one knows what to believe. And those that apparently are spiritual heroes, they apparently, although it's not noted in that manner by ordinary history, by ordinary intelligence, they apparently verge on being exceptions that they did know what to think and they did not need a group. Contraire, they seem to have started their own collection. That is, they seem to have been the cornerstone, the founders of a religion, like that suddenly a Jesus or a Muhammad pops up and he says, well, and then he starts saying what just sounds like that he knows what to think. I know they call it believe. But it seems as though he knows what to think about being alive, what the purpose might be, what we should do. Forget that he says, well, the gods told me. Because if it gets to it, I'm not saying that actually what happened at the time is irrelevant. But what else would he tell a group of people, a Muhammad or anybody, that no one else knows what to think? That is, no one else knows what to think about being alive. That is, no one knows what to believe. And suddenly a guy seems to be there, and he knows what to believe. And he seems to strike something in the group of people at that time, other than being insane. But you've always got guys insane going around saying, I know the purpose of life, we should all wear frog costumes. Or something. So we're discounting that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So any of you people that's into frog costume bondage and stuff, don't write me. But I'm saying somebody pops up, a Muhammad or a Moses or an Abraham or a Jesus or a Buddha, and he seems to attract just ordinary people. The city folk seem to be attracted to it. What is he doing? He seems to be displaying a knowledge of what one should think. And at that time, going back, we're way off the track again, sort of. No, we're not. At the time, these people get attracted, if they're going to say, which people are always going to unless you slap them around to start with, they're going to go, how'd you know all this? What's he going to tell them? Now, he could try and tell people the truth, which, again, is beside the point, but I could suggest to you that somewhere along the line, I may or may not know personally, that they tried that. But now you've got the ordinary in you, and we'll assume that you got a little of the unordinary. But you got the ordinary in you. And so if the group of people came up that suddenly and no matter who, the Buddhas and the Jesuses, Mr. X, back in history, suddenly starts talking and telling people, large groups of people at his time, just average people, telling them things, and they go, yes, yes, yes. And it sounds as though, no matter what you think now, but it sounds as though he, by himself, just popped up that he knew what to think about being alive. And so they get interested and they listen and they seem to benefit from it. They enjoy it at least. And finally, they ask him individually or they come up in a group and they say, geez, where did you get this? Now, you do it all in you. What would you tell them? Now, he could have said, well, I don't know. I just thought about it. Are you going to believe that? I mean, there they are. And probably, well, without any doubt, a lot of them had as much education or more than he did. They were better looking. Whoever we're talking about. They came from better families. They did everything. And they go, come on. No, really, tell me. I'll sponsor you for a new car, a new temple or something. But just tell me. Where'd you get this? And he said, well, I thought you were serious, so I told you the truth. I don't know. I just thought about it. Come on. Don't worry just about history and out there. You should be able to hear what I'm saying in there. And that's even beside the point of whether that actually occurred in that way. But do you hear that would have been the basis of it, that after the fact, historically looked upon it, it turns into something else. But you should be able to see from a quite specific just flow of energy that those figures that seem to stand out as opposed to science, we're still talking about the one side that seems to be religious, those people that seem to stand out as being great figures of anything other than science, which is I'm calling religion, they at the time, and even looking back, they seem to by themselves to have known what to think. Now, I stress that to get you back where we were. You should be able to feel this yourself, because I cannot prove it, that at the ordinary level, individuals do not know what to think. And it's not some curse, it's not some flaw, it's they simply do not. Now, as might belie or might support, according to how you look at it, that old proverbial, I guess it qualifies proverbial phrase of people saying, well, in this case over here, the individual parts are greater than the whole. Which those of you that have any extensive training in symbolic or formal logic can question that. But it would strike one from one level as being very questionable to say that no individual, that it's just a fact, that no individual knows what to believe about being alive. But you get collections of them together and something comes out. Religions, formulas, guidelines, civilizations, cultures. That's all it is. But how can it be? I mean, if you've got, it doesn't matter what your mind might say. If you've got 5 people, 50 people, 50,000 people, and they're all peckerheads. They're all stupid. You put them all together, what are you going to expect to get out of it? Well, maybe big gallons of collective stupidity. But to say, well, wait a minute, you mean if you take a whole bunch of people, I hate to get technical, but if you take a whole bunch of people that don't know nothing and you put them together, you mean they're going to know something? Yeah. We all know that's silly, except for this. It ain't silly. That was back to one of the questions I was asking you to consider. Could it be that civilization is not, or comes about not because people do get together and develop cultures, develop societies, develop a sense of morality, which in one view has got to be, if you're going to take a pretty hard-nosed view of the evolution of humanity, just as they normally think about it in civilization, you would have to say, all right, men progressed from lower, cruder forms of Homo sapiens, and as they did and became civilized, part of it was being able to sit down and discuss matters instead of kill one another, to discuss their debate over who owns that woman, who had her first, who owns this cave, who found this stream over here. Rather than that, and rather than killing each other, they could discuss the matter. And so it would appear from one view quite validly that civilization came about. Religions, cultures, the arts, everything that is singular to the secondary world of man on this planet, that it all came about because men could discuss things. Because men would get together collectively and instead of killing one another, they would talk about their differences. But could it be that civilization came about? That is, that men fell into collective being a secondary reflection of man already being, as they would call it, a pack animal, which shows, well, of course, as many of you know, is why dogs can domesticate you and get you to do what they want to. Whereas cats have more trouble doing that with humans. But if you are a sociable pack animal to start with, which man is, I was trying to get you to see, move that now from the strictly physical level of dogs and pack animals, move it into the secondary world, and then back to the question, back to consideration, could it be that men are not civilized simply because they can get together collectively and come up, can debate, discuss, give and take? Not because, but that they become civilized so that they can do that. I know that every time I bring that up, it's been 5 or 6 times now in the last 2 shows, I noticed that, what's the term, diminishing returns? There is something, I was going to try and move on a little bit more, but there is something there, which I'm going to hit you from the science view, but there is something absolutely there that would have seemed to affect you closer down in the limbic system, down in the goo rather than the lightning, down into the lamb rather than the merry part, which is what all religion seems to be, of feeling rather than thinking, of believing rather than knowing. But getting away from all the civilized, which is simply collective ideas about gods and religions and the purpose of life, away from that is then to realize that all such ideas of every nature came from collective thinking. Not that it's wrong, but it did not come from an individual, and it sure as hell did not come from you. Of course, you're ordinary, you can go, huh! That verges on blasphemy, if not ignorance, because it did come from me. I was raised a Southern Baptist, and I got into school and I came to my senses, and I now realize that God is obviously an Anglican. And so you can say, if you're ordinary, that I picked out what I believe. It is collective thinking. Not that it's wrong, but that is part of civilization, of men getting together, and it's only groups of men that can believe in religion. One more time, no offense. It's no attack on religion. Nothing's wrong, but it's only groups of men that can come up with the idea of God in that anthropomorphic sense. No one anywhere on this planet, no human, ever sit around by himself. Somebody out there, the true noble, well, better than that, the noble, intelligent savage, the guy by himself. There's never any one person sitting somewhere on this planet had a natural IQ. They couldn't even measure it. Stanford and Benet hadn't even been born yet. Plus they'd never even dreamed of inventing those cough drops. But just trust me, the smartest guy that ever lived by himself never sat around and just accidentally thought about God. Never, never, never. Never. It's not possible. It takes a group. So all ideas of what to believe about life must come from collective effort. It never comes from an individual. It's not possible. So on that end of the stick, you can look at religion. Look at civilization. Let's call that end of the stick. Civilization cum religion, as opposed to civilization cum science. You can look at as being groups of individuals who do not know what to believe come together and collectively can come up with it. You might also make a side note. It would seem to be that in some way life via man still senses that there is a continuing risk that an ordinary man alone still might be too unreliable and feral. But just the Kairoot tonight kind of reminded me, if you were listening, that he said it would only be a revolutionist that could be truly civilized by himself. Which it could have said alone, you understand? That if you had anybody else at an ordinary level off by themselves, just what I was talking about, this noble, intelligent savage, let's strike the adjectives and say this savage. This loner. We find a guy by himself somewhere, grew up on an island, all by himself, never seen anybody else. I assure you he will not qualify in any way to meet the criteria of being civilized. If he's over the age of 12 or so, you're going to have your hands full, every house breaking him. It would only be what I was suggesting, someone thinking in a new way that could be civilized by himself, which is another way, if you want it crudely, of saying being civilized with no restraints. Being civilized, nobody has to tell him to. Contrary, the reason I brought that up, contrary was what I just said, that in the sense that men collectively get together, have to, and they come up with what to believe. Religion, morality, all standards of civilized behavior. That's all religion. That they do it collectively, that no one can do it individually, and it's almost as though there is some kind of continuing sensation within the body of life, oozing out through man, that senses that still, up until now, that the ordinary man, if he was left alone, not just on an island, but if he was left alone, that is, put here, even in the midst of other people, but was not forced into some kind of collective thought processes and debate, that ordinary people are still, you're running a high risk that no matter they may be all dressed up and look all right, but they may be still internally, nervous system-wise, too barbaric. It's unreliable. But a whole bunch of people together, and they're a lot more civilized. It's easy to attack the mob mentality in some specific. instance of a whole bunch of people got together and did something, and they attacked some poor little lady over here, or some minority group of religious sect in their midst, and say, well, those people did it collectively that they wouldn't have individually, which you're talking about the closer to a primary pact drive of people. It's a fair observation. But notice that is the exception. It is the groups that are civilized, more so than the individual. And you can try and explain it away. You can say, yeah, well, people are simply more civilized in a group because they know they're outnumbered. They're afraid somebody's going to watch them. You know, that's all virtue is. That's all conscience is. You figure somebody might see me do this. And so you go, yes, I'm civilized. You can call it anything you want to, but it's a fact. It still operates on the basis. The operational reality is groups of people are only to be trusted in comparison to individuals. Whole groups of people do not, as a rule, jump out of alleyways and beat you up. Whole groups of people do not make your life miserable. I'm talking about whole groups, like whole societies. It's individuals. It's individuals cannot be trusted. It's individuals who are atheists. That's why they never can get atheist organizations really off the ground. I mean, you go in any nice sized city and you call up, you look up, and if the phone book they got an atheist society, I guarantee you, it's 50-50 chance the phone's disconnected. They just can't keep members. And especially you look under something like unreasonable or barbaric thugs of Detroit or where it is, their phone is almost always out of order or disconnected. Well, we got 5 minutes. Let's go ahead and jump into science. I was going to say the other end, the apparent stick. As you can speak of the groups of men, we're still talking about the same basic survey, generally known as civilization, but groups of people coming together. In science, which would appear to be far, far removed from religion, but you still have the same situation. If you do not believe it, if you don't see a connection, look at education. Period. If any of you could hear that and the tape was already out, I'd take off my mic and leave. What is education? What is formal education of all forms, of all stripes? It's collective thought. It's no offense, it's a hobby to some of you. But to say, well, I want to be, all my life I've wanted to be a dentist, or all my life I've wanted to know how to operate a tow truck. And so you either go to the SC, ST, whatever it be, you're watching TV and it's the Cleveland School of Tow Truck Driving, or the Cleveland Night School of Dentistry. If you wanted to learn how to drive those huge 18-wheelers, or if you want to know how to pull people's teeth, all you got to do is go to the library. Of course, even I knew I'd get a laugh, but do you hear me? The whole idea that in education you have got to have, and I'm talking about the institution of education, that we have got to get together here, and I mean, you can't do it by yourself. Think about it. Are you that stupid? Are you that ordinarily dense that you cannot see that anything they can teach you at Harvard you could learn by yourself? Now, I know, because this is the way life is. Again, it's not wrong, but life is arranged to where if you want to become something important, like an attorney or a physician or a tow truck driver, in most places you have to be licensed, and then the states, it's a whole institutional, and then you've got to be a graduate of a legitimate school and all that. And so you could say, if you're ordinary, you could say, well, wait a minute, maybe you could learn how to be a dentist by just going and reading books. But they wouldn't let you, take the dentistry exams. You could never actually get to be a dentist. You got to play the game. I understand that. But do you hear me? Your ordinary intellect wouldn't even go that far. Your ordinary intellect would say, no. If you're going to learn something, if you're going to become a scientist, if you're going to become a mathematician, I mean, Jesus, you got to go to school. If you really want to do it right, you probably go to MIT. And don't say MOUSE. Listen quick. Can you hear that your own intellect tells you it rejects what I'm saying, even though it makes sense, and if for a second you go, yeah. You do understand, all right, let's call it theoretical. for those of you who are underage, that theoretically, you can go to the county in which you legally reside, get yourself a library card, assuming it's a big city, a comprehensive library, and anything you want to learn, just about. At least the theoretical side, the teaching side. If it is how to be a dentist, if it is how to drive the big 18-wheelers, you eventually got to put your hands on somebody's motors and on a steering wheel. But insofar as what they would be teaching you in the classroom, you can go down to the library, sit there by yourself at your own hours, and learn everything that they would teach you at Harvard or MIT or the Cleveland School of Tow Truck Driving. You do hear that. You can't deny it. Oh, sure you can. All you got to do is wait a second and you'll hear it and go, that's nuts. You can't do that. You're an idiot if you say that. I'm sorry, you're ordinary. Because you know you can do that. But will it work? And forget the things about, well, no, it won't work, because if you do that, they won't let you take the exams, you can't practice your profession. I know all that. But notice, now we're at the other end of religion. We're into science. Thinking, not believing. We're into the hard, cold world of science. Of knowing stuff. Not believing crap, not worrying about God's facts. Men have to get together collectively to come up with facts. No, you almost tried to trick me there again. No, I didn't. It's not just going to Harvard. It's that you get all those people together and they can think of stuff that one guy can't. And you can say, no. Wait, how about Aristotle? How about Erasmus? How about Leonardo? How about an Einstein? Hey, let's go back to religion. How about a Buddha? How about a Jesus? What makes these people apparently stand out? Because apparently they suddenly could think of things that even astounded the institutions of education. I'm just saying apparently, because that is not the norm. The norm is what I'm telling you on the other end of the stick from religion is into knowledge. Not belief, but knowledge. And it's the same thing. You have got to have collectively whole bunches of individuals that don't know nothing. We're not talking about believe nothing now. So religion was over here. Now we're in the hard world of science. That's why I'm using the technical terminology. You get bunches of guys, individuals together that don't know nothing. And they get together and suddenly they seem to know something. Hey, go figure. We'll pick it up next time unless some of you have continuing back problems.